The muddy waters of the Mara River roared past David Thompson's chest, wrapping him in a cold, relentless embrace as he fought each stroke against the current. Just minutes earlier, the 34-year-old wildlife photographer had been setting up his gear on the bank in the golden light of dawn, never guessing that the next moment would shatter every rule he'd lived by. Now, drenched and determined, he carried a trembling lion cub clinging to his shoulders like a lifeline, its tiny claws digging into his skin as river water streamed past them in roaring torrents. How had his quiet day in the Mara transformed into a heart-stopping rescue mission in the span of a single heartbeat? David had spent the past 8 years capturing the untamed beauty of Kenya's Masai Mara through his lens. Sillions. He knew better than anyone that the cardinal rule of nature photography was to remain an invisible observer, never interfering with life's raw performance. Yet, when he heard the cub's desperate squeals cut through the river's thunderous roar, his instincts pulsed louder than any professional code. He dropped his camera without hesitation and dove into the churning water, driven by a simple, unshakable truth. He couldn't just stand by and watch a creature drown. And so, beneath swirling currents and slapping debris, a photographer became a savior, one human against a river, determined to overpower him. As he propelled himself downstream, a submerged log crashed into David's left shoulder with the force of a battering ram. Pain exploded through his body, but the cub's frantic grip around his neck spurred him onward. Each surge of adrenaline was met with exhaustion, every pull of his arms against the violent surge a negotiation between hope and helplessness. Behind him, the cub swallowed water, its panicked gasps reminding David how close they were to tragedy. Still, he pressed forward, determined to reach the muddy shallows before the current swept them into the crocodile-haunted depths below. Unbeknownst to David, 5 lionesses stirred in the shade of acacia trees a short distance away. They had followed their cub scent through brush and overland, their muscles coiled like springs as they listened for his distress calls. Now, at the river's edge, their tawny forms materialized through the haze of spray and sunlight, their amber eyes locked on the struggling pair in the water. Sue. David's blood froze at the sight. 6 apex predators, every step deliberate, closing in as he clung to life, and a cub he barely knew. Could mercy exist in the gaze of wild lions? Standing chest deep, David faced a semicircle of giant cats. To his left, the matriarch took a slow, deliberate step into the shallows, her rippling muscles tense beneath a golden coat. To his right, the dark-maned male watched with regal composure, his massive head held high. No escape route was visible, no path to safety, except through the animals ready to unleash lethal force at a single misstep. David's mind spun with every horror scenario he'd ever read, but even as fear clutched his heart, he saw something in the matriarch's eyes that stopped him short. No glint of hunger, no flash of blind aggression. Instead, he sensed recognition. The cub in his arms mewed again, a soft, urgent sound that cut through the tension like a key turning in a lock. The matriarch's ears twitched, and she answered with a series of gentle chuffs, the same affectionate calls lionesses use to beckon their young. In that instant, predator and prey became mother and child once more, and the standoff dissolved into something resembling a reunion. David dared to draw an even breath as the matriarch edged closer, her massive head lowering until she was just 3 feet away. Then came the gesture that would rewrite every rule he thought he knew about wild animals. The matriarch bowed her head, a deep, deliberate motion of respect that transcended every scientific definition of predator instinct. David felt her warm breath on his face as she raised her golden eyes to his, and for a heartbeat, the river's roar faded behind a profound connection. Would he ever feel truly alone again after such a moment? What followed was nothing short of miraculous. The matriarch extended her broad muzzle and began to groom him, her rough tongue sweeping across his forehead in a gesture of acceptance usually reserved for her own pride. 30 seconds passed, each one heavier with unspoken meaning, as lionesses, father and cub watched with relaxed bodies. The message was unmistakable. This man was no threat. He was the one who had risked everything to save one of their own. Behind him, the pride's formation shifted from circle to corridor. The massive male padded forward from the shadows, positioning himself like a guardian beside David, while the 4 other lionesses formed perfect lines on either side. It was an honor guard, a ceremonial passage through which David would return to the safety of his equipment. Never had he imagined being treated like a welcomed guest by Africa's deadliest hunters. Never had he felt such reverence from creatures born to stalk and kill. Oh. As the riverbank neared, the matriarch pressed a final greeting, her forehead against his, in an act that would be replayed millions of times on social media. "A thank you," David whispered, unsure if they could understand him, but certain they felt the gratitude behind his words. One by one, each lion brushed his legs or touched his shoulder with a gentle nudge before melting back into the tall grass. The cub, now steady on its paws, sat and tilted its head skyward, offering a soft mew that sounded, remarkably, like a farewell. When the pride vanished into the trees, David sank to his knees by his camera gear, water dripping from every strand of his hair. His waterproof action cam had captured the entire encounter. From the cubs, plunged through the rescue to the matriarch's unlikely embrace. Wildlife experts would later authenticate the footage, and in labs far from the Mara, scientists like Dr. Sarah Mbeki would marvel at the cognitive recognition and gratitude on display, a level of emotional complexity no one had ever recorded in wild lions before. And still, for all the technical analysis, David knew the true miracle was simple. Compassion speaks a language louder than roars. In the weeks and months that followed, David returned to the Masai Mara time, and again, greeted each time by a chuff from the matriarch and a curious stride from the now-grown cub. Local guides began calling him Simba's brother, and tourism outfits flashed his story to anyone who would listen. Dr. Becky Mbeki founded the Thompson Mara Research Foundation to study the bond he had witnessed, asserting that this was not merely animal behaviour, but a revelation of shared values, gratitude, honour, and moral debt. For David Thompson, the day he dove into the Mara River hoping only to photograph wildlife became the moment he learned that kindness knows no species boundary. Surrounded by kings of the savannah who could have ended his life in an instant, he discovered that trust can span worlds. And as the sun dipped below the horizon of the vast African plains, one truth remained clear. Compassion is the universal language we are all born to speak. Months later, as the dry season settled over the Mara, David returned once more, not as a distant observer, but as a familiar presence under the acacia trees. Sunlight filtered through golden grass as he set up his camera, and there, just beyond the lens's frame, the same matriarch stood watch. See ya, Maynets. She chuffed a greeting that rippled through his chest like a warm breeze, and the cub, say, a juvenile lion with a sleek, tawny coat, sidled up to his legs, brushing against him, in quiet curiosity. Each morning, he retraced the path of that rescue. The river, now a gentle ribbon of water, cutting through the plains, its fury tamed for the season. Yet every time he stepped toward the bank, he felt that old rush of adrenaline and the echo of rushing currents, reminding him how thin the line can be between life and loss. In village gatherings under lantern light, Mausi elders recounted the story as if it were legend passed down through generations. Children listened wide-eyed, imagining a man who dared to challenge a roaring river and found acceptance in the eyes of a lion. Tour buses rumbled past where once only dust kicked up under migrating herds, each stopping for guests to glimpse the hallowed spot of the rescue. Documentary crews arrived with microphones and blinking lights, but David remained hesitant to relive the moment for cameras. His bond with the pride was private, carved by compassion rather than spectacle. Still, when he finally agreed to share the footage, the world watched breathless as the matriarch's grooming became a symbol of interspecies trust. Yet for David, the greatest reward was not the accolades or the papers published in glossy journals. It was the quiet assurance that kindness, once offered, can awaken the wildest hearts. And as the sun sank behind distant hills, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, he felt a stirring of something even deeper than gratitude. The promise that the next time life called for courage, he would answer again, whatever, far, sir.